Afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon are questions to First Minister. Question 1, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the provision of health services in Brecon and Radnorshire?
Yes, our priority is to ensure that all people in Brecon and Radnorshire, as elsewhere in Wales, receive safe, sustainable, high-quality healthcare, and of course healthcare that is delivered as close to patients' homes as possible.
Thank you, First Minister. I've recently been contacted by a clinician who looks after my constituents. He states that on his recent ward round, out of the 12 patients in his beds, 5 were suffering from delayed transfers of care and 5 more were nearing that position. He put that down to an inability of the local social services department to provide timely packages of care at home. I'm also contacted by constituents who are desperate to get their relatives out of nearby district general hospitals back to community facilities, but they can't because there is a lack of beds. What can the Welsh Government do to ensure that healthcare and social services are more in alignment and that patients do not have to suffer because of the inability to source packages of home care?
The Leader of the Liberal Democrats will know this forms an important part of the work of the Williams Commission. I can say that generally across Wales, delayed transfers of care were down in July, but nevertheless, it's important that local authorities do look very carefully at the packages they provide in order that people can go home. Ultimately, of course, we want to make sure, as I said earlier on, that people don't spend more time in hospital than they need to, and we'd expect Powys, as well as every other local authority in Wales, to be able to deliver a service that people would expect. But again, we know that there are issues that will need to be resolved as part of the Williams process to improve the service for local people.
Joyce Watson.
First Minister, I welcomed, as many of my constituents did, the Health Minister's decision earlier this year to commission a special review of healthcare in Wales. And I understand the Welsh Institute for Health and Social Care, which has carried out that review, is due to report in the autumn, if not indeed this month. Are you able to provide an update on the study, First Minister, and are you able to indicate a timetable for your response and also the Health Board's response to its findings?
Yes, the timetable has not changed to my knowledge, and of course it's an important study. We look forward to studying in depth its findings and then of course acting on the recommendations.
Thank you.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, the people of Brecon and Radnorshire, of course, have their health provided by the Powys Teaching Health Board, which, of course, had an overspend of almost £20 million in the last financial year as a result of your Labour government's NHS cuts. Will you, what assurances can you give the people of Brecon and Radnorshire, and indeed the wider country of Wales, that the resources which are available to the NHS are sufficient to meet their needs, especially when we see an ambulance service in crisis, waiting lists spiralling out of control, and cancer patients not able to access the drugs that they need?
Well, that was an ironic speech given the announcement yesterday with regard to one cancer drug. He seems to have forgotten that one.
One down.
If you look at the figures for Powys, in July of this year, we see that referred to treatment times shows a 98.6% performance against a 95% target, with no patient waiting in excess of 36 weeks. That is one amongst many items of data that show the people of Powys have healthcare that is provided well for them, both by English providers, that is true, and by Welsh providers. And we want to make sure, of course, as we look towards the budget, that money in Wales, in terms of health spending, continues to grow, and we will be in a position where health spend in Wales per head remains above that of England, as it has always been.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And to return to real services for constituents in Brecon and Radnor, one of the problems with there being no District General Hospital in the county is the reliance on community services. And as we weigh up the report that you're about to receive by Professor Marcus Longley, how can you ensure that the government's response is one that actually develops community services and maintains them? Because generally speaking, through West Wales, it's fine to deal with some of the cuts happening in hospitals, but you must have those community services in place to take up the slack, and that isn't available in all parts of Powys or generally across West Wales at present.
Well, of course, the study has been welcomed by everybody involved in the sector in Mid Wales, and we're looking forward, of course, to see what that case will bear out. And we expect this to be completed by the end of this month. And once the results are available, or the outcomes are available, the Minister will consider those outcomes.
To Paul Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on his priorities for transport in West Wales over the next 12 months?
Well, we've introduced a range of actions to improve transport. For example, we're continuing to provide support for bus services, including support for Bookabus, and also in April, of course, we officially opened the A477 between St Clair's and Red Roses, which is all important to the residents of the area.
First Minister, I recently met constituents in Fishguard who are calling for a bypass to deal with some of the traffic congestion going into the town from the direction of Cardigan. Now, your predecessor some years ago acknowledged the difficulties of using the roads in this part of Fishguard. So will you as a government commit to considering proposals that would resolve these problems, including the creation of a bypass in the area, given that we are now to receive another round of European funding?
Well, I know the road well, and there is a very difficult bend on one part of the road as you turn to go up the hill by the harbour. I would imagine, in knowing the area, that it would be a major project to create a bypass. I have to say that, but having said that, I will ask the Minister to consider the demand for a bypass in that part of Fishguard, to build on what you're already doing in Fishguard, namely securing the future of the train services to the harbour and the town and into the east.
Prif Weinidog, beth yw...
First Minister, what's the Welsh Government's policy on roundabouts on dual carriageways? Because questions have been raised on access to the new road that you just mentioned between St Clair's and Red Roses from the Llawn direction. There is some concern as people pull out there that cars may be travelling at great speed on that route and that it could actually cause accidents.
Well, it is, of course, usual to have roundabouts on all roads, but of course not on motorways. As regards that road in particular, may I ask the Minister to write to you directly on that point?
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon we have the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, events in Scotland and the response of the UK parties has created a new context for debate on the Constitution in these islands. Is it your view that the time has now come to go further on tax powers for this National Assembly? And do you agree that a referendum on income tax powers is now not necessary?
No, I think the referendum will still be necessary, but I do agree that the current suggestion in the Wales Bill is now consigned to history. I don't find anybody looking to defend the lockstep, for example. I do think there is great scope now to look once again at the tax varying arrangements of the devolved administrations as a whole and to go beyond what the Wales Bill actually says.
Thank you for your answer there. It's interesting that you want to keep the referendum in place, so that's one area of no change. I've listened very carefully to what you've had to say in recent days on the question of home rule for Wales. Now, it's important to establish how your suggestion of home rule differs from the current arrangements or from the silk proposals for further devolution. So I wonder if you could tell us, do you, for example, support the devolution of the criminal justice system to this National Assembly in the near rather than the distant future? Or do you support, for example, the removal of the upper limit on energy powers? What exactly does home rule look like to you, First Minister?
Well, first of all, we must separate powers from structure. To my mind, the issue of powers must be dealt with separately. That means the Wales Bill must progress through Parliament. I would like to see the whole of Part 1 implemented beyond the Wales Bill, the whole of Part 2 implemented, and of course Wales's underfunding dealt with. Those are fundamental. With regard to the convention, I would envisage the convention looking at the structure of devolution within the UK to create what I've described as home rule in the UK. That would mean there would need to be initially a meeting of all 4 administrations. A way forward would need to be agreed, and the final constitutional arrangement would need to be agreed by all 4 governments. It is not sufficient for the whole thing to be done in Westminster without there being proper input from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The Leader of Plaid Cymru is absolutely right to say that things have changed. I have to say to members that I suspect if I had said 3 months ago that I was in favour of home rule, I'd have received a great deal of criticism from elsewhere, but that's the way things have changed now. And I have not been silent in terms of my view of what the future should hold.
I welcome the indications that you've given today, First Minister, on a possible change in pace and the fact that you want to go beyond the silk recommendations in terms of powers for Wales. In that spirit then, would you be prepared to work with me and the other party leaders in this institution to agree a joint Wales position on securing meaningful new powers from the UK government by or during the next Assembly term?
Yes, I would. I'm prepared to work with all parties to do that. We have a good record of doing this. We did it, of course, before the 2011 referendum. I'm aware, of course, of the Leader of Plaid Cymru's view. I'm aware of the Leader of the Liberal Democrats' view. I don't know yet what the view of the Leader of the Welsh Conservatives is on this issue. But as a bare minimum, we need to see Part 1 plus Part 2 of Silk plus underfunding addressed. We need to see the structure of the UK's constitution change. The idea of all sovereignty coming from Westminster is now outdated. The idea that the Secretary of State for Wales should be able to veto any bill from this chamber is wrong. The idea, for example, that Wales should not have control over its own energy resources is also wrong to my mind. And it's also wrong, of course, that even if this is a theoretical possibility rather than a practical issue, that it is possible in law for the UK Parliament to abolish this place without reference to the people of Wales. That cannot be right in the 21st century, and it shows why there needs to be change.
We now move to Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, 18 months ago, I challenged you on figures that showed that some patients were waiting up to 5.5 hours in the back of ambulances outside A&E departments. You said then that you were, and I quote, assessing the needs in terms of what must be done. Last week, we saw the tragic consequences of such delays. Could you outline to the Chamber what you have done in the last 18 months to resolve this situation?
Well, first of all, I'd urge members not to preempt the inquiry that will take place at the events of last week, and my condolences go, of course, to the family. It's not quite as straightforward as it seems, but I leave the inquiry to make its findings. I am pleased with the fact, of course, that we have seen an improvement in ambulance response times, and I expect that improvement to continue.
The most recent figures show that you are further away than you were a year ago in meeting your A&E targets, and it's clear that many A&E departments are struggling to cope, with some honourable exceptions, I must say, in Cwm Taf. Do you anticipate that the Welsh NHS will ever meet your A&E targets whilst you're the First Minister?
Yes, I do. Those targets are testing, I have to admit, and sometimes there are reasons why those targets are not met. For example, one of the things that is believed sometimes, when we talk about A&E waiting times, they are waiting times that people have to wait before treatment. They're not. They are the times that people wait in A&E from the time they arrive to the time they leave or are admitted to hospital. That's the first thing we have to remember. On that basis, of course, there will be occasions, and practitioners have said this to me, that sometimes they have to keep people in to wait for tests. Better that than admitting them to hospital. There will be occasions when people are waiting longer than 12 hours because the alternative is to admit them, maybe 3 days then in hospital. So, yes, it's important, of course, that people do not have to spend an inordinate amount of time in A&E, and 90% of people are in and out within 4 hours. But there will always be those people who will need to spend more time in A&E waiting for results, and all in order, of course, to avoid being admitted to hospital.
Slight assurances from yourself and the Health Minister that delayed transfers of care would be tackled with a new sense of urgency. The reality is that delayed transfers of care are up on what they were last year. That means that there are fewer beds for people who need to be in them for clinical reasons. That can lead to longer waiting times in A&E departments and subsequently more ambulances queuing outside A&E waiting to discharge their patients. when would you anticipate that we will see dramatic improvements in delays transfers of care that we need to see?
Well, yeah, she is right to point out that compared to this time last year, the figures are up, but they are down from the previous month. Two things.
All right,
First of all, the Community and Hospital Interface National Task and Finish Group has identified a number of actions at local and national level that will need to be taken forward. Also, of course, because of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, there are ways now to ensure more collaborative working between health and social services in order to reduce the number of delayed transfers of care. And we expect, of course, as that act is rolled out, to see that number to decrease even further.
And finally, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, last January you said, we want a sustainable health service that is based on the guidance that doctors themselves give. Last week, many of us would have seen the British Medical Association's report that stated it faces imminent meltdown. Their key recommendation was the Welsh Government should commission an urgent and full-scale independent Wales-wide inquiry into all NHS health services throughout Wales. Doctors have given their advice. When will the Government act?
Well, the difficulty, of course, is that the BMA, not doctors, the BMA are not consistent in the messages that they give. For example, back in March they said, the data demonstrates clearly that the claim that Welsh hospitals deliver worse outcomes than English ones is a wicked slander, said the BMA. In March, Dr Banfield, who said that the Welsh NHS was in meltdown, said, don't bring in a Keogh-style inquiry. And Dr Mark Porter, the chair of the BMA Council, said that his party, the UK government, were being fundamentally dishonest about their funding of the NHS. Now, the difficulty is, isn't it, that when you have such inconsistent statements, which ones do you believe? And I have to say, his comments are not supported by others who work within the NHS.
Well, First Minister, I think that emphasises how important this report is that they've brought forward. Very often when they've wanted to criticise us as an opposition, they have criticised us. They do not take a political position in this. They listen to their members and they act. The BMA goes on to say in this report that the NHS in Wales has a non-listening culture that is a widespread problem across the NHS institutions and poses a significant threat to patient safety. The current arrangements for raising concerns do little to reassure doctors that they can give a voice to the concerns, otherwise they will be reproached. First Minister, when is your government going to actually create a culture within the NHS that doctors' concerns can be listened to, can be acted on, and patient safety and clinical excellence is at the forefront of thinking, rather than taking sanction against people who highlight these problems?
They are. When I came to live in Cardiff, I lived in a house with 6 medical students. I knew a lot of medical students now, which means I know a lot of consultants and GPs now. I spoke to a few of them over the weekend. Not one of them agreed with a comment that was made. Not one. Now, I am impressed by an organisation that calls for an inquiry into its own members, which is exactly what the BMA has done. But I do think it's important that the BMA does two things. First of all, that it is consistent in what it says. And secondly, that where it has concerns, that it might want to address those concerns to government first, rather than putting them in the media.
It's the usual flippancy and arrogance that we see from this First Minister. Here is a comprehensive report that is looking at the NHS in its entirety. As I said, they are an organisation, when they felt the need to criticise us as a party or any of the other parties in this institution, they have criticised and offered the view that they see fit for the Welsh NHS. They have brought forward a review that says that an independent inquiry is required to look into all aspects of the Welsh NHS. They have highlighted that the Welsh NHS faces imminent meltdown. They have highlighted how doctors feel that sanctions will be taken against them when they raise concerns. Perhaps that's part of the problem in the hospital in your own constituency, and that's why it's facing so much problems at Princess of Wales. When, First Minister, will you bring forward such an independent inquiry? As I said in my opening remarks, you're prepared to listen to some clinical advice, but when it doesn't suit you, you're not prepared to listen to what's good for the NHS here in Wales.
If the Leader of the Opposition has evidence of doctors in my own hospital being suppressed in some way, let him bring it forward without making cheap political points on allegations that are not based in any way in evidence. There's no one shouting. He shouts a lot and says very little. That's the way he is. But the reality of the situation is this. His party has been described as fundamentally dishonest by the BMA. Why should we disbelieve them in that regard? And I have to say, let's not be naive about this. There are pay discussions taking place at the moment. BMA says it wants to be listened to. Why then has it not appeared at any of the pay negotiations on behalf of its members at any time? Not a single meeting. They have been invited to discuss the pay and terms and conditions of their members. They have not on one occasion turned up to discuss those terms and conditions and pay. We are prepared to listen to the BMA, but we would prefer it if they were consistent, that they turned up to talk to us rather than using the media as a megaphone.
We now move back to items on the questions on the agenda, and question 3 is Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister provide an update on Welsh Government plans to tackle bowel cancer in Wales?
Yes, our plans to tackle all forms of cancer is set in the Cancer Delivery Plan. With bowel cancer, of course, early diagnosis is essential, and that's why, of course, we have a proactive screening programme.
Thank you, First Minister. According to information from Bowel Cancer UK, only 3 health boards in Wales have undergone accreditation for their endoscopy units by the Joint Advisory Group for Gastroenterology. My local health board, Betsy Cadwallader, is not amongst this number. As this accreditation aims to assess units on clinical quality and patient experience, do you share my concerns that over half the health boards in Wales have not gained this accreditation? And what encouragement will your government be placing on the Betsy and fellow health boards to become accredited at the earliest possible opportunity?
Well, across our nation, I know the Minister announced in March that an additional £4 million to reduce waiting times for diagnostic tests was made. On the 1st of August, Betsy Cadwallader was allocated £448,000 to be used to accelerate the reduction in waiting times in other diagnostic tests and endoscopies to a maximum of 8 weeks to improve their position. And that improvement is expected by the end of March next year at the latest. And I can assure the member that progress is being monitored on a monthly basis.
And accreditation?
What actions is the Welsh Government taking to improve public transport services in the Cynon Valley?
Well, we are committed, of course, to improving public transport accessibility in all of the valleys. Some actions include, for example, the A470 bus corridor improvements being developed under the Metro Phase 1 funding programme, but also, of course, in the negotiations on the new franchise.
Thank you, First Minister. Well, over recent months, I've continued to be contacted by constituents unhappy with the Valley's line rail services between Cynon Valley and Cardiff. Quite often trains are late, they are still very cramped and sometimes in poor conditions. Now this is totally unacceptable. I know last week there was some discussion during your question time on the future rail franchise arrangements. What impact do you think these poor experiences will have on the awarding of any future rail franchise in Wales? And in addition, what work will be done as part of the South Wales Metro project, as you mentioned, to make sure we get the travelling conditions for passengers right?
I mean, the member raises a perfectly valid point. The reality is we are stuck with the franchise arrangements that were made under a previous arrangement. And they have not consistently served the people of Wales well. We want to ensure in the next franchise that there are frequent services, that the rolling stock is of sufficient quality as well, and also, of course, to see more frequent services. You will have heard the Minister for Economy, Science and Transport show her enthusiasm for the South Wales Metro project, the scheme. Moving that forward will mean that people from the Cynon Valley, from Pedair as well, and all our valley communities should see better, cleaner, faster and more frequent transport.
Andrew Davis.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Metro project, which you just closed your answer on that question, is a vital important part of the transport infrastructure for the future here in South Wales. There have been intense discussions between yourself and the Welsh Office. What is your take at the moment of how those discussions are progressing and what can we look forward to in the future?
There have been no discussions with the Welsh office, I can promise him that. It's the Wales office. Secondly, I can say that the discussions have proceeded with the Department for Transport. They don't go via an intermediary with the Welsh office, with the Wales office. I've done it myself now. There we are. That's 1-1. The issue is this. I have noticed a difference in tone with the new occupant of the Wales office, the Secretary of State, and I welcome that. And he has said that he is looking to see a solution which we all want to see, a solution that is fair and that delivers. It's the hope of all involved now that we are close to a solution that will see the project delivered.
Leanne Wood.
If I can echo the comments made previously, people in the valleys must see day-to-day improvements from any investment in rail. First Minister, in 2011, Ieuan Wyn-Jones, as Deputy Minister for Transport in the previous Welsh Government, he announced plans to reopen the rail passenger line between Aberdare and Hirwaun. Now, this service was closed 50 years ago, and the closure has meant the loss of an important transport link for people in the Cynon Valley. Now, while preparatory work was taken with Ieuan Wyn-Jones, his office term came to an end shortly after that. Now, there appears to have been very little development in progress in this passenger service in the 3 years that have passed since then. Can you offer any hope to the people of the Cynon Valley that this service will be reinstated, or is it deemed not to be a priority for your government now?
Well, I think Ieuan was Deputy First Minister rather than Deputy Minister for Transport, in fairness to him. But the point is a fair one. It's been right to say that we've seen progress on the railways. We saw the opening of Fishguard and Goodwick Station and the extension of the services there. We're seeing, of course, the improvements in the line between Wrexham and Saltney Junction. And we will, of course, continue to review further reopenings in the future. The line's still there, of course, because it was serving Tower Colliery. This is something that we will keep under review, because we have a good record of reopening railway lines, whether it's the Vale of Glamorgan line, whether it's the Ebbw Valley line, and many members who've been here since 1999 will remember that it was impossible, almost impossible, to travel north-south by train in Wales without a long layover in Shrewsbury. Now we have a 2-hourly service, and we'd want to see the quality. I know what people are going to say. I want to see the quality of the rolling stock improve in the future. That much is true, and greater consistency with the service. So we have a good record in reopening railway lines, and we will always, of course, look to open up new lines where that is possible, particularly examining the line between Aberdare and Hirwaun.
Elena Parrott.
Diolch Llywydd. Returning to the Aberdare to Cardiff line, First Minister, a number of the stations on that line had their platforms extended back in 2008 to accommodate 6-car trains as part of a £13 million investment which you described as future-proofing the network. Can you tell us, now that we are 6 years into the future, when we can anticipate seeing some of those 6-car trains on that very overcrowded service?
I'd like to see that start in 2018 when the new franchise begins. From our point of view, we would prefer to see devolution of the necessary powers with a fair and equitable funding settlement from the UK government, so we are able to specify and procure the next franchise. We can't do that at the moment, acting on our own. We would like to see over £4 million put in for additional Peak Valley carriages, including, of course, Aberdare services. But it would certainly be helpful if the franchising arrangements were wholly devolved together with the funding. That's not the case at the moment.
And 5, Lynn Eagle.
What assessment has the Welsh Government made of the impact that the UK Government's Universal Credit Scheme is having on people in Wales?
Well, in July, we published the latest research by the IFS, which suggests that that universal credit will lead to an annual loss of income in Wales of at least £40 million. We are also monitoring statistics on the numbers affected by universal credit.
Thank you, First Minister. I'm sure you're aware of the Wales TUC's Saving Our Safety Net campaign on the 5-week benefits wait facing newly unemployed workers under universal credit. I'm sure you would agree with me that this is too long a wait for someone who's lost their job and who is struggling. We know that this will hit 15,000 people in Wales every month, including some 500 of my constituents. And we should also be mindful of Trussell Trust figures showing that a third of people using food banks already cite benefit delays as the reason for their referral. First Minister, will you join the growing chorus of opposition to this move by personally lobbying the UK Government to reverse their decision on the 5-week wait? And will you also join me in encouraging Welsh people to support the TUC petition against this very unfair policy?
I would give my full support to that, and I can assure the member that the Minister for Communities and Tackling Poverty is now considering the detail of this change. And of course, it will be our position as a government to fight anything that leads to unfairness, particularly for those on the lowest incomes in our society.
Mohammed Ashgar.
Sir, on the subject of welfare, will the First Minister advise if any study has been made of the potential impact on Wales of Labour plans to cut the value of child benefit should they win the next election?
There are no plans to cut the value of child benefit.
Alan Fred-Jones.
Thank you. Part of the changes to the benefits system, of course, is the bedroom tax, which is such a burden for so many people. Has the government undertaken a study to see how many people are affected either by having to move house because of this tax, and what is the cost of the loss to Wales because of this tax?
I have no specific figures on that, but given what I see in my constituency, I see people having to pay more because, of course, it's not easy for them to move. There's an assumption in London that it's an easy thing to do. It's not. But I'm very pleased that my own party at the UK level have made it clear that we will abolish this tax.
Question 6, Mark Isherwood.
The First Minister outlined the Welsh Government's policy in relation to the treatment of child cancers.
Yes, our national standards for children with cancer aged 0 to 15 years provides a foundation for the NHS to plan and deliver effective, high-quality services for children.
Thank you. Well, as you're probably aware, this month is a National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, which is why many of us across the Chamber are wearing these gold symbols, hoping that these ribbons will become synonymous with child cancer. In that context, how do you respond to the recently bereaved parent in Mould who wrote to me stating there's so much that needs to be done to raise awareness of childhood cancer, but there's very little funding that goes towards the research of childhood cancer?
I cannot begin to imagine what they're going through, first of all. And certainly, I'm sure I speak for all in this chamber when we offer our deepest feelings to them. I'm pleased with the fact in Wales that all children are seen within the target time. In terms of awareness, I think the member has a point in the sense that most parents would not think that their child will get cancer, and as a result would tend to look for other reasons why a child is ill. That's why, of course, it's important to raise awareness, and I thank the member for doing that today, so that parents do seek medical help where that is needed, because we know that with lots of cancers, and leukemia is one example, ALL, acute lymphoblastic leukemia is one example, where the cure rate has increased immensely over the past 20 years. But of course, as with all leukemias, early discovery is vital because, of course, leukemia is an illness that weakens people and weakens children. And the more robust children are to be able to have the treatment for leukemia, the better are their prospects. And I look forward certainly to, he's mentioned this month as being a month of awareness, to seeing awareness being raised, if I can put it that way, for it is a very important issue.
Question 7, Peter Black.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the implementation of the Andrews report?
Yes, a Trusted to Care steering group has been established to oversee and drive implementation of all the recommendations within the report. And work is underway to ensure the quality and safety of care provided to our frail elderly population and ensure that that is what indeed they receive wherever they are in Wales.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. You'll know, I think about 15 nurses have now been suspended from the Princess of Wales Hospital as a result of actions leading from that report and other reasons. The Andrews report makes it quite clear that other professionals, including management, were responsible for some of the shortcomings identified in that report. Can you tell me why it's only nurses that are being singled out in this way, and what action is being taken against other people who have been identified as causing this problem?
As the member will be aware, the management has changed since those difficult days that nobody can defend, quite frankly. And I'm certainly assured by the fact that, for example, when it comes to complaints, they are now being dealt with in a proper fashion, whereas bluntly, in the past, they were not being dealt with in sufficient time or at all. And that was one of the findings that was made. But what I can say is that having established the steering group, it had its first meeting on the 29th of July. And of course, spot checks have been carried out. Some 70 wards across 20 hospitals across Wales were visited between the 15th of June and the 30th of July. And that steering group will now, of course, take the report forward.
Byron Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Recommendation 3 of the Andrews Report highlighted the need for the Board to identify clear steps to generate a culture of care built on public involvement in the setting and monitoring of standards. Instead of introducing the concerns clinics as suggested, the Board went with establishing an internal professional standards task force, which would tie in with the whistleblowing policy. Given the BMA's recent concerns regarding the whistleblowing policy, saying the NHS does not welcome criticisms or complaint as it stands, will you look at this professional standards task force within ABMU and look to see if they are encouraging whistleblowing and generating a culture of care built on public involvement, or, as I fear, achieving quite the opposite and ensuring that whistleblowing is perhaps kept to a minimum?
I think the member raises an important point. I will ask the Minister to write to him in answer to that question, to provide him with the reassurance he requires.
Jenkins.
First Minister, back in June, your colleague, the Minister for Health, told me that his officials have regular quality and delivery meetings with each NHS organisation in order to monitor performance, and that they are supplemented by 6 monthly joint executive team meetings between the Welsh Government and NHS organisation executives. Quality and safety are key features of these meetings, he added. Are you satisfied at the moment that Abertawe Bro Morgannwg's board understand when exactly your government expects it to deliver the necessary changes? And can you exemplify to me here today what the consequences will be if they don't deliver on those changes that are exemplified within the report?
Oh, they will be expected to deliver. The Health Minister has made that clear to them. If there is no delivery, this is true of any local health board, if there is no delivery or no sufficient delivery, then there are consequences in terms of personnel as far as that board is concerned. But I don't expect things to get to that position. I would expect the board, having considered very carefully, I know what the Andrews report has said, to take the action that's required.
Question 8, Lindsay Whittle.
Diolch. First Minister, what assessment have you made of the need to establish the office of a Disability Commissioner for Wales, please?
Well, it is a question I know the members raised on more than one occasion here in the past. Can I say that the appointment of a commissioner wasn't seen as a priority by those who attended our consultation events on the Framework for Action on Independent Living. Rather, they wanted to see a strong focus on strengthening the voice of disabled people themselves so that they can have greater choice and control over the services that they receive. So the emphasis is on ensuring that they have a stronger voice rather than at this stage the creation of the post of a commissioner.
Thank you for that answer. I keep getting different answers to this question. One of your former cabinet members has recently stated there was no demand for such an appointment. Well, he's not there now, but I can inform him that of the 12 leading organisations that I've contacted who support the needs of persons with disabilities, 11 have expressed their support in writing for a disability commissioner. Now, I don't believe you're saying they're wrong. I don't believe you're saying they don't know what they're talking about. But what I do believe is that you do need to rethink your stance, and please stand up for disabled people in Wales and act now, please.
No, I'm not saying they're wrong, and I'm not saying they don't know what they're talking about. The point I make is that this wasn't something that featured strongly in the consultation that took place. And I think the first thing we need to do is to make sure that people have their voices strengthened as individuals. I think that is where the focus has to be at this moment in time. But of course, if a strong case is made for a commissioner, that is something we'll always take into consideration.
Darren Miller.
Officer, I'd like to put on record my support for the post of a disability commissioner. I think it is something which Wales could do and innovate with. But will you accept that that commissioner's role would not just be in terms of providing a voice for older people, but could also encourage better working between health and social services, where there are many barriers which unfortunately have consequences for disabled people?
Well, if there were to be such a post created in the future, then of course there would be a debate as to what the powers and responsibilities of that commissioner would be. I think all accept that the interface between health and social care has been a difficult one for many, many years, and we know that there are proposals that have been put forward as to how to deal with that. But for the time being, as I said to the member on the plaid benches, the priority is to strengthen the voice of individual disabled people, and then once that is done to a satisfactory level, perhaps other things can be considered after that.
Question 9, Aled Roberts.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. How does the Welsh Government ensure that Welsh interests are fully represented in UK-wide and international bodies?
Wales is represented at ministerial or official level on a number of UK-wide and international bodies. Our aim, of course, is to ensure that Welsh interests are promoted and protected.
First Minister, a number of us visited the OECD in Paris recently as part of the work of the Children's Committee. And a number of us were disappointed that there wasn't any representation from Wales on specialist panels within the OECD, and also because it is the United Kingdom delegation that actually accomplishes work on behalf of the UK. So there wasn't any information or understanding of policy in Wales. They were only representing England policies and English policies. Are you willing to look at this situation in considering all the changes and discussions that are taking place regarding the constitution of the UK?
Well, yes, I think that's a fair point, but may I also say that meetings have taken place between ministers and officials from the OECD. The health minister, for example, met with the Deputy Secretary of the OECD in April, and the former Minister for Natural Resources and Food had been part of the OECD Forum in May. So we are playing our part in Wales, but of course as part of the negotiations on the new constitution and the new union, we will have to consider what Wales's role and what the role of the devolved government is on international bodies.
Mick Antonin.
First Minister, now that every UK political leader has accepted your long-standing call for a constitutional convention, is it the Welsh Government's intention to consider perhaps preparing a paper on what the parameters of that constitutional convention should be, and possibly a paper on perhaps the Welsh Government's views on what the nature or the options for that sort of UK-wide reform should actually be?
Yes, it is something we're giving consideration to. As I said to members earlier on, it is essential that a constitutional convention is seen as representing all of our 4 nations. I've noticed now we are now 4 nations, the family of nations, as the terminology has it. Because we are a family of 4 nations, it would make no sense if the discussion on the convention was not inclusive of all 4 nations. So my hope is that we will see the convention process move forward, that the 4 governments can sit together and agree a way forward, because bluntly what's been happening over 15 years is that devolution has been seen in isolation in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. There have been conversations in 3 different rooms. Now the time has come to have the conversation in one room in order to provide Wales with the strong identity it needs as an equal partner within a strong UK.
William Graham.
In terms of international bodies, First Minister, could you outline how your administration collaborates with the UKTI, the Global Entrepreneur and the Sirius programme?
We have very good links with the UKTI now. I think it's fair to say they've grown dramatically since 2011. Whenever I have travelled to other countries, UKTI have been immensely helpful in terms of the contacts that they have created. There are parts of the world, of course, where we do need our own representation because they are major investors in Wales, but our own representatives work with the UKTI in any event, as the member I'm sure would expect. But I'm satisfied that the working relationship is good, and it's certainly of advantage to us to be able to draw on the expertise of UKTI in markets where historically we've had little presence.
Question 10, Anne Jones.
Thank you. Will the First Minister make a statement on the impact of the UK Government's welfare reform programme on communities in the Vale of Clwyd, please?
Well, I'm deeply concerned with regard to the Vale of Clwyd and Denbighshire, of course. Our research suggests that Denbighshire is the 8th hardest hit local authority in Wales, with an average loss higher than the Welsh average.
Well, thank you for that, First Minister. And just to echo what my colleague Lynn Neagle said about the delayed benefits that are occurring and the TUC's campaign, can I say I fully support that? Many people in my constituency, and as you say, we've been the 8th hardest hit, will now be amazed that Denbighshire County Council are looking to close their welfare rights units as part of their financial management due to what they perceive to be the worst settlement that they've had from the Welsh Government. They fail to recognise that for every pound that a welfare rights unit fetches back into the person's pocket, that generates more income locally, and so therefore would be of a benefit to them. Will you, as a government, look to see what you can do to ensure that welfare advice services and services like that are maintained within structures so that people do not actually feel the benefit of or can access some advice to mitigate those services?
I understand that Denbighshire has taken the decision to cut funding to its welfare rights unit. That, of course, is a matter for them. But what I will say is that at a time when people are at greatest need of help and support, it's important that any level of government prioritises the needs of those people. It's something that we would certainly do as a government, and we would encourage others to do the same.
Mark Isherwood.
Thank you. Earlier this month I chaired a meeting of the Cross-Party Group on Disability in North Wales, at which one of the speakers was Denbigshire's Corporate Equalities Officer, but we also heard about a wide range of employment services from both the DWP and Remploy in Wales. What action, therefore, are you and the Welsh Government taking to work with agencies such as those I've mentioned to remove barriers to employment that restrict life choices for disabled people so that they too can be independent and equal in society?
Well, I mean, everyone will know, of course, of the employment support grant that was put in place after the decision to close the Remploy factories around Wales, and that has helped an immense number of people to get into work, and certainly they would not be in that position if it wasn't for the support that has been provided to them by us as a government.
Claire Griffiths.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In your response to the member for Dyffryn Clwyd, you said that everyone had to make maximum effort to support those people who need support in the current climate. Why has your party therefore announced that you're to cap child benefit payments?
Well, what I am proud of is the fact that we are going to increase the minimum wage and the fact that we are going to abolish the bedroom tax, or whatever you wish to call it, and also to ensure that people feel that any improvement in the economy is something which is relevant to them, and people don't think that at the moment, and I'm proud that my party has made those pledges to help those people who require that help.
Finally, question 11, Jenny Rathbone.
What information does the Welsh Government receive from the UK Government about the impact of welfare reform?
In general, the analytical information that we receive is published on the DWP website, and that includes assessments, statistics and research reports.
Minister, First Minister, I had a very serious case in my constituency recently where a constituent who was being transferred from one benefit to another had absolutely no benefit whatsoever since July, and they had to pawn their jewellery in order to survive. Now, such cases, I fear, are not isolated, and I wondered what response you might be able to get from the Secretary of State on this matter, because my letters go unanswered.
I would be more than happy, of course, for the member to write to me, and I would be then more than happy, of course, to bring the concerns of her constituent to the attention of the Secretary of State in order to await his response.
Diolch. First Minister, universal credit was brought in so as to reduce administration costs, and it is very sad indeed if certain issues like that outlined by Jenny Rathbone are indeed happening. Will you undertake to work with the UK Government, with the Secretary of State, but also importantly with local authorities as well, who Anne Jones very eloquently earlier said are not being given the right support from your government in terms of supporting people receive the benefits they need?
I do wonder whether I've entered a parallel universe there for a second, because perhaps the member will be aware it's his government in London that have introduced this, not us. And he may also be aware, he seems to accept that hardship is being caused, and I welcome the refreshing honesty. I think the comments about fundamental dishonesty don't apply to him, certainly today. I welcome that. I'm also intrigued by his comments that the whole purpose of universal credit is to cut costs of administration. Now, the whole point of universal credit, I was told, was to help people. Apparently that is no longer the case. We have that admission on record this afternoon, but I can assure the member for Monmouth that we will do all that we can in order to help those people whose lives are being slowly destroyed by the party that he represents.
Thank you, First Minister.